She wowed American Idol judges with her stunning voice, but there's so much more to Sophie Powers than what you saw on TV. Did you know that before her big audition, she was living a completely different life? Or that behind her rise to fame, there's a journey filled with struggles, hidden talents, and secrets only a few know? In this video, we're uncovering what American Idol didn't tell you about Sophie Powers and how she went from a small-town girl to an unforgettable contestant. Get ready to dive deep into her untold story. When Sophie Powers walked onto the American Idol stage in 2025, most of America had never heard her name. But for those already tapped into the alt-pop and punk-influenced music scene, Sophie Powers wasn't some wide-eyed newcomer. She was already building an impressive following with her unique fusion of punk aesthetics, confrontational lyrics, and Gen Z candor. Born and raised in Toronto, Canada, Sophie had started uploading her music online long before her Idol appearance, and had already cultivated a niche fan base who loved her rebellious energy and fashion-forward style. At just 20 years old, she wasn't just a singer. She was also a designer, a songwriter, and a creative force with a clear vision for her artistry. Unlike many Idol contestants who arrive seeking validation or a platform, Sophie seemed to arrive with something entirely different in mind. And that's exactly what she did. Sophie's entrance on Idol was unlike any other that season. From the moment she stepped in front of the judges, Lionel Richie, Luke Bryan, and guest judge Carrie Underwood, it was clear she wasn't there to conform. Clad in a bold outfit that blurred the lines between grunge, high fashion, and DIY punk, Sophie didn't give off the vibe of someone auditioning for permission. She gave off the vibe of someone delivering a performance whether the judges liked it or not. Before she even sang a note, Sophie made it known she was performing an original song called STFU. She described it with a mischievous smile as a tearjerker, setting the audience up for what would be a hilarious bait and switch. What American Idol didn't tell you about Sophie Powers is that she didn't need the show. She had already built a music career on her own terms. Before even auditioning, she had released tracks like Clearview and Greed, had collaborated with alternative artists, and was steadily gaining momentum online. In a world where traditional gatekeepers still try to hold the keys to stardom, Sophie was already picking the lock with a crowbar. Her appearance on Idol was less about chasing a dream and more about testing boundaries of the show, of its audience, and of the judges themselves. Whether intentional or not, Sophie exposed how narrow the show's musical expectations can be. She didn't sing a power ballad. She didn't try to please everyone. She did what she always does, challenge the norm. As Sophie Powers' performance wrapped up, the judges exchanged puzzled looks, not quite sure what to make of the chaotic blend of raw emotion and rebellious flair she had just unleashed. Was this a train wreck or a masterpiece? Lionel Richie, ever the diplomat, offered some hesitant praise, while Luke Bryan seemed visibly uncomfortable, caught between admiration for her confidence and confusion over her audacity. But it was Carrie Underwood's response that had everyone talking. She seemed to be on the edge of something, but what exactly was it? Sophie Powers' audition on American Idol was anything but conventional. From the outset, she made it clear that she wasn't going to be the typical tearful contestant performing Adele or Whitney Houston in a desperate plea for 3 yes votes. She introduced her performance with the kind of dry wit and mischievous delivery that could either charm a room or make it very uncomfortable. Telling the judges that her song was a tearjerker, she immediately set the tone for something emotional and serious, only to flip the script entirely. The track she performed, STFU, was a pop-punk-inspired anthem dripping with sarcasm, rage, and attitude. Lyrically, it was a satirical and biting commentary on the annoying things people do, like talking too much in public or offering unsolicited advice. Instead of reaching for emotional vulnerability, Sophie reached for unapologetic realness, and that's what made her stand out. She didn't hold back. From the moment the beat dropped, Sophie launched into her verses with a level of commitment that demanded attention. The lyrics were blunt, bordering on comedic, but delivered with enough energy and charm to stay just this side of abrasive. Lines like, "Shut the fuck up, I'm not asking for opinions," weren't just lyrics. They were a challenge to the entire American Idol format, which is built on critique, judgment, and commentary. Even the judges looked visibly thrown off, unsure of whether to laugh, applaud, or intervene. Carrie Underwood tried to hide her amusement. Lionel Richie looked slightly stunned, and Luke Bryan could barely keep a straight face. This was not what they had signed up for, and that perhaps was the point. What American Idol didn't tell you about Sophie's performance was how intentional it was. This wasn't a random act of rebellion or an off-the-cuff joke. STFU was a fully developed piece of music. Sophie had written, recorded, and released it herself prior to the audition. It wasn't some gimmicky last-minute idea. It was part of a broader artistic identity she had already been cultivating. She knew who she was and what she wanted to say. More importantly, she knew how to make people uncomfortable in the best possible way. While many contestants tailor their image to fit the show's expectations, Sophie challenged the show to accept her as she was, or not at all. In doing so, she exposed how tightly controlled the Idol brand still is, even 2 decades after its inception. Her audition wasn't just a performance, it was a disruption. And that's why people still can't stop talking about it. As the judges sat in stunned silence, their faces a mix of confusion and intrigue, the room seemed to hold its breath. Sophie Powers had just delivered a performance that none of them had expected, a performance that didn't just challenge the rules, it exposed them. But that was only the beginning. What came next was even more unexpected, as Sophie's unfiltered, unapologetic persona began to clash with the polished, controlled image the show wanted to project. Would she make it through to the next round? Or would American Idol's strict standards push back against her raw authenticity? If there was ever a moment on American Idol when the judges collectively asked themselves, "What is happening right now?" Sophie Powers' audition was it. As soon as she began singing STFU, the room's energy shifted. The judges, Carrie Underwood, Lionel Richie, and Luke Bryan, seemed stunned, not by a lack of talent, but by the sheer audacity of her performance. Sophie didn't come in with a neatly packaged ballad or a feel-good backstory that tugged at heartstrings. Instead, she brought a bold, punk-infused pop song that directly called out overtalkers, micromanagers, and basically anyone who just wouldn't leave her alone. It was a far cry from the emotional pleas or gospel-tinged classics typically favored by the panel, and it left them speechless. Lionel Richie, ever the voice of calm and reason, looked like he was trying to wrap his head around what he had just witnessed. You could see the wheels turning as he attempted to process both the musicality and the message of the song. Luke Bryan, on the other hand, was clearly caught off guard, torn between amusement and bewilderment. And Carrie Underwood, herself an Idol legend and guest judge for the season, appeared to stifle a laugh, her eyes darting between Sophie and her fellow judges. For a moment, it seemed like none of them knew quite how to respond. After all, when a contestant tells the world to shut the fuck up on national television, what do you say in return? The truth is, Sophie's performance didn't fit into the pre-established mold of what American Idol tends to reward. The show has always been rooted in a certain kind of Americana, emotional vulnerability, clean-cut ambition, and a polished presentation. Sophie upended all of that in 3 minutes flat, and when it came time to vote, the tension was clear. All 3 judges, though respectful, ultimately voted not to send her to the next round. It wasn't because she lacked talent, it was because she didn't fit the blueprint. Carrie praised her individuality, but questioned whether the song was right for the Idol stage. Lionel called her unique, but seemed hesitant to endorse such a rebellious energy. Luke, trying to balance honesty with kindness, echoed similar sentiments. What American Idol didn't tell you was how narrow the scope of acceptable artistry can sometimes be. Sophie wasn't denied because she couldn't sing. She was denied because she refused to conform. And in that moment, the show revealed its limits. Sophie Powers pushed the boundaries, and instead of embracing that risk, the judges chose to retreat into their comfort zone. As the judges gave their final verdict, Sophie stood there, resolute, her defiance more visible than ever. But what happened next? How did Sophie react after the camera stopped rolling? Was this the last we'd ever see of her on American Idol? Or did this rejection spark something even bigger within her? But what the show didn't show was Sophie's response to the elimination. Behind the scenes, there was a surprising twist, one that could change everything. Did her moment of rebellion on national television set the stage for a career far beyond American Idol? Or was this just the start of a much deeper story, one that would unfold in ways no one expected? The moment Sophie Powers' American Idol audition hit the airwaves, the internet lit up. Social media exploded with reactions ranging from total outrage to absolute adoration. There was no middle ground. Some viewers were instantly hooked by her unapologetic, tongue-in-cheek energy, while others were appalled that a contestant would dare walk into the sacred halls of Idol and drop a song titled STFU. On platforms like Twitter, TikTok, and Reddit, clips from her audition began circulating within minutes. Comments poured in. Some people hailed her as a punk pop queen and the most refreshing thing to happen to Idol in years, while others declared she was disrespectful, inappropriate, and a sign the show had gone too far. In short, Sophie Powers became the most talked about contestant of the season, and she didn't even make it past the audition round. What American Idol didn't show you was just how divided the reaction really was. While the episode gave us a few shots of the judges' bemused expressions and a brief montage of viewers watching at home, it didn't capture the cultural flashpoint Sophie had become. Major media outlets took notice almost immediately. Music blogs praised her for bringing an authentic Gen Z perspective to the show, describing her performance as a masterclass in satire and self-awareness. Others, like some mainstream family entertainment critics, condemned the song as inappropriate for primetime TV, citing its explicit language and sarcastic tone. But the controversy only fueled more curiosity. People who had never watched American Idol that season were now scrambling to find the clip just to see what all the fuss was about. And then came the memes. Sophie's bandaged nose, her deadpan delivery of the tearjerker line, and her razor-sharp lyrics were instantly turned into viral content. Fans edited her audition into fake movie trailers, reaction videos, and even animations. The moment transcended the show itself. Whether you loved her or hated her, Sophie Powers was suddenly in the pop culture conversation. This wasn't just about an audition anymore, it was a case study in what happens when mainstream institutions meet the chaotic, meme-driven, boundary-pushing sensibilities of the internet age. And to many viewers, Sophie didn't fail the audition. She hijacked the entire narrative and walked away with something far more valuable than a golden ticket. What the show didn't, and probably couldn't tell you, is that Sophie's impact went far beyond a few judges' opinions. She tapped into a generational voice that refuses to play by the rules, and for a brief moment she made American Idol feel like anything but predictable. While American Idol gave viewers a glimpse of Sophie Powers' audition and the judges' reactions, what the show didn't show was her own reaction once the cameras stopped rolling. In the days and weeks following the broadcast, Sophie took to social media and gave interviews that revealed just how self-aware she was about the firestorm she had ignited. Her post-audition perspective was anything but bitter. In fact, it was refreshingly honest, funny, and even grateful. She didn't lash out at the judges or the producers. She didn't play the victim. Instead, she owned the moment with the same bold energy she brought to the stage. One of her most quoted responses to the backlash was, "For the haters, I don't blame you. I would too." That line alone summed up Sophie's entire philosophy. Take the heat, laugh it off, and keep moving forward. What American Idol didn't tell you is that Sophie knew exactly what she was doing. She went into the audition fully aware that STFU was a risky choice, that it might ruffle feathers, and that it might not earn her a golden ticket. But she wasn't there to play it safe. She was there to introduce herself to a new audience on her own terms. And she did exactly that. In interviews, Sophie explained that the song was meant to be humorous, relatable, and cathartic, an anthem for anyone who's ever wanted to scream into a pillow during a frustrating day. It wasn't a cry for attention, it was a slice of her reality, and she served it up with style. Instead of sulking over the rejection, Sophie leaned into the moment and used it to build momentum. She released a full version of STFU on streaming platforms, allowing fans to hear the entire track, unedited and uncensored. She posted behind-the-scenes content from the audition, poked fun at herself, and thanked fans who defended her online. The backlash didn't scare her. If anything, it energized her. She understood that controversy often breeds conversation, and conversation breeds exposure. The fact that her audition went viral was no accident. It was part of a larger strategy to get people talking, and it worked. What Sophie's post-audition reflections revealed was something far deeper than a viral moment. They showed an artist who understands the game but refuses to play by its rules. She turned rejection into promotion, criticism into connection, and chaos into control. Sophie didn't need American Idol to validate her. She used American Idol as a stage, said exactly what she wanted to say, and then walked away with her head held high, and her Spotify streams climbing. One of the most talked about and mysterious elements of Sophie Powers' American Idol audition had absolutely nothing to do with her voice, her song choice, or even the judges' reactions. It was the bandage on her nose. Audiences across the country immediately noticed it. A stark white strip covering the bridge of her nose, it sparked instant speculation. Some thought it was a fashion statement. Others assumed she had injured herself right before the audition. A few even joked online that she wore it as armor before performing a song called STFU in front of a notoriously critical panel. But what American Idol didn't tell you, and never bothered to clarify, was the real story behind that bandage. And it wasn't just a random quirk. It was in typical Sophie Powers fashion, deliberate, symbolic, and a little bit punk rock. Shortly after the audition aired, Sophie addressed the bandage in a series of cheeky Instagram stories and interviews. She revealed that she had undergone a minor cosmetic procedure just days before filming her audition. It wasn't a secret she was hiding, it was just part of her reality. Rather than delay her appearance or try to cover it up with makeup, she chose to wear it openly and unapologetically. For Sophie, the bandage wasn't something to be embarrassed by, it was a symbol of honesty. In a culture obsessed with filters, perfection, and hiding every imperfection, Sophie did the opposite. She walked onto one of the most watched television shows in America with a visible sign of recovery on her face, and she didn't say a word about it. That silence was powerful. Sophie knew people would notice, and she was fine with letting the bandage speak for itself. It became an unexpected part of her performance, another layer to the image she was presenting. Punk isn't just about loud guitars or edgy lyrics. At its core, it's about rejecting norms, embracing authenticity, and flipping societal expectations upside down. Sophie's nose bandage became an accidental metaphor for her entire idol journey. Honest, raw, unpolished, and completely unconcerned with what others thought she should look or sound like. What American Idol didn't tell you was that the bandage ended up making Sophie even more memorable. While other contestants might fade into a sea of ballads and heartfelt sob stories, Sophie stood out, not just for her song, not just for her attitude, but because she showed up as her real, imperfect self. And in a world of curated image and televised perfection, that's more rebellious than any song could ever be. While most contestants use American Idol as a launching pad into the music industry, Sophie Powers flipped the script. She used Idol not as a beginning, but as a blip, a bold, controversial, headline-grabbing chapter in a career that was already gaining traction. What American Idol didn't tell you is that Sophie didn't fade into obscurity after getting cut. In fact, the opposite happened. She harnessed the chaos, the criticism, and the curiosity that came from her audition, and used it to fuel her next moves. Within days of her audition airing, her music streams surged. STFU climbed into streaming playlists, TikTok remixes popped up, and her Spotify monthly listeners grew by the tens of thousands. She turned a 3-minute rejection into a marketing masterclass. Even before her Idol appearance, Sophie had been laying the groundwork for her music career. She had already released several singles, including Greed and Clearview, and had collaborated with artists in the alt and pop punk scenes. But now, with mainstream attention focused on her, she had something even more powerful. Rather than trying to clean up her image or make herself more palatable to the masses, Sophie doubled down on who she was. She leaned into her punk pop aesthetic, released more music that was raw, honest, and intensely personal, and started teasing new visuals that matched her rebellious energy. The bandage on her nose may have been temporary, but the impression she left was permanent. Industry professionals took notice too. Indie labels, producers, and alt-leaning music outlets began reaching out. Sophie started performing at underground shows, alternative festivals, and Gen Z-oriented events. Her fan base, many of whom discovered her through her audition, rallied behind her with cult-like intensity. On social media, fans began calling themselves the STFU Army, and many began showing up at her shows wearing nose bandages in solidarity. It was a movement born out of irony, authenticity, and that uniquely Gen Z ability to turn chaos into culture.